This video is going to go over the retouch and repair demo in Photoshop. Once you're logged into your Blackboard course for digital imaging, go under Demo Files, and then you're going to want to scroll down to where it says Retouch and Repair Photos. Right-click on that zip file and save link as, and save it to wherever you have been saving your digital imaging demos onto your computer. Once that is done, you're going to want to locate that zip file, double click on it. You can delete the zip file after you have extracted it, so double clicking on it is extracting it. Double click on that folder and you're going to see a series of images. Just to make things a little bit easier, let's just go ahead and open up all of these in Photoshop in whichever way you are most comfortable doing. We are going to be starting with the Retouch, Repair, Rotate JPEG. So there's a multitude of different things that we need to fix in this photo. But before we really get into anything too heavy, the first thing that we should do is we should fix the crop and the rotation of it. So it looks like this image was maybe scanned in, or maybe someone took a photo of the photo, but in any event, it is not perfectly straight. So we want to straighten it, and then in doing that, we also want to remove the white space that's here because we don't want that to be part of our photo. And then the other thing that we want to do, just taking this a step further, I want to show you how whenever you are cropping, you can also tell the end result image size to be a certain size. So we are going to go with 6 by 4 inches, which is a common photo size. So the first thing you want to do is select your crop tool on the toolbar. And then in your option bar, you're going to see a drop-down menu, and it might say something different depending on if you've used this before. But we're going to go to width, height, and resolution. And in the first text box, it should say 6IN. In the second text box, it should say 4IN. And then in the third one, we are going to do 200 for the resolution. And just so you know, IN is short for inches. So basically what Photoshop does is it now makes the crop box, and it's slightly smaller than the image. Like you can see, if I try to make it bigger, even if I hold down shift, it's not going to include the entire photo, because Photoshop is saying if you want this to be a 6 by 4 inch image, this is the dimensions that you have to work with. Okay, no big deal. I'm actually going to make this just a little bit smaller because I don't want to include any of the white. Now what I'm going to do is make it so that that top bar is as close as I can get it to the actual image edge. And then let me just zoom in a little bit more so you guys can see I have the top of the bounding box pretty close to the top of the image. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my cursor outside of the corner, and then I'm going to click and drag, and you can see you can actually rotate. All right, so what I want to do is try and make it so, see how it's not completely parallel, it's a little bit wider at this end and then tapers at this end. So I want to try and get that as close to even as I can. And then I can always recompose, so I can click and drag this around to where I want it to be, and I can, you know, scale this out a little bit more. I want to include the shadows down here because we're going to be using that later in the demo, but this is about where I want to start. Once you have your crop box where you want it, you can either hit the checkbox up in the option bar, or you can hit the return or enter key. Okay, so once you do that, the next thing that we're going to fix in this image is the contrast correction and the color correction. So whenever I say contrast, I mean the difference in the highlights and the shadows in this particular image. So I want the brightest parts of the photo, the parts that I feel are white, to be truly white, and the parts that I feel should be black to actually be black. That's going to make a high key image, and high key image just means high contrast. So low key would be low contrast. And whenever you first look at a photo, especially if you're not used to looking at photos a certain way, this photo might look like the contrast is good. The shadows look nice and dark, the highlights look nice and bright. But I'm going to show you a way to find out if those shadows truly are pure black and if the highlights truly are pure white. In doing so, we're also going to look at the midtones and see if there's any color cast on the midtones. The first thing that I want you to do is go up to your menu bar and choose Window, Info. Window Info. Okay, so with this open, we are going to do a couple of things on this image. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get the eyedropper tool. All right, so if you look on your toolbar, it's about a third of the way down. Okay, you could also hit the I key. All right, so what I want you to do is I want you to plot 3 points. Okay, and by plot, I just mean click. So the first point is going to be wherever you think the brightest white part of the photo is. Okay, or something that should be purely white. It might be the speed limit sign. You might say this part of the building here. You might say this part of the building here, as long as it doesn't have a color cast on it. So this right here might have a color cast on it because it looks like it has a yellow tint. So we want something that looks like it should be purely white. So I'm going to put my cursor, and I'm actually going to zoom in just to make sure I get this right. I'm going to put my cursor right over this part right here. I'm going to hold down Shift. Okay, so hold down Shift and then click. So what you just did was you plotted point number 1, and you'll see number 1 right there. Also, if you look in the info panel, you now have a number 1 quadrant or box, and then this box is giving you values for R, G, and B, red, green, and blue. Now, if this point were purely white, all of these numbers would be 255, because 255 is the full amount of red, the full amount of green, the full amount of blue. And color theory tells us that white is the full presence of all colors. So these should all be 255. So I'm not even close to the white that I chose. Maybe wherever you chose was a little bit better. Next, you want to choose where you think the pure black is in this photo. Maybe you think it's over here in the shadow. Maybe you think it's here in the shadows in the tree. Maybe right here. Wherever you think the darkest part of the photo is without any obvious color cast. So don't choose the shadow on the grass because that's going to have some green in it. So maybe I'll hold down Shift and I'll click over here. Okay, so now I plotted point number 2. Number 2, all of these should be 0 because black is the absence of color. So all, red, green, and blue should be 0. Well, I'm not even close. Now, you don't have to get it spot on, but you should be pretty close. I'm not close at all. All right, point number 3, we're not going to be using it for contrast. We are going to be using it for color correction in a few moments. So we're just going to go ahead and plot it since we're here. So for color correction, you want to choose a midtone. So some mid-gray color that shouldn't normally have a color cast on it. So I'm going to use this darker side of the pole that the speed limit sign is on. So I'm going to hold down Shift and I am going to plot point number 3. Right, and then I'll just go back to my move tool for now. All right, so we will be going back to this info panel in a few moments, but for right now, we are going to fix the contrast using this info panel as a guide. So what we're going to be doing, and we'll do this even more later in the quarter, is using something called an adjustment layer. An adjustment layer allows you to make changes to your overall document without destroying the background layer. Whenever you're working in Photoshop, you want to try and work non-destructively, which means that you're never permanently destroying any particular raster layer. So to find your adjustment layer icon, go down to your layers panel at the bottom, and the icon that's in the center, it looks like a circle that's half filled in, that's your adjustment layer icon. Get used to this and really start to use this icon as much as you can. So click on this, and unfortunately mine is kind of cut off down here at the bottom. But if you scroll down, you want the one that says levels. Any of these 4 right here will help you adjust lightness and darkness and contrast, but we're going to use levels for this particular photo. Okay, so whenever that comes up, what you can see right here is a histogram. And histogram is telling you the tonal information of each pixel and how much color is in that pixel. So basically it's telling you how much dark you have in the photo, where your midtones are, and where your highlights are. Now, if this were a perfect histogram, these, and I kind of refer to them as mountain ranges because that's kind of what they look like, these would go right down to the corner, right down to the edge of the corner, and not kind of be peeking off the edge here. But ours do not reach. You could come in and take these sliders. This is going to affect my highlights, and you could pull this in, and this is going to make it brighter. The opposite end is going to make it darker. So you could come in and just do that, but it's making it a little bit too dark for me. So here's what we want to do. Instead of using the sliders in the histogram, which we'll use in future demos, but not right now, look at the eyedropper tools right here. This first one looks like it's filled with white ink. So basically what you're going to do with this eyedropper is you're going to click wherever you think the brightest white part of the photo is. Well, we kind of already put that down. Side note, if you hold down or if you press caps lock, your cursor will change to a crosshair, like crosshair bullseye, and that might help you line up your plotted point number one, but you don't have to have caps lock on. Just wanted to show you that extra little trick. So click that number one right in the middle of that circle there. You can see that already made a difference. Now come back over to the left of the histogram and click the eyedropper with the black ink, and then click where you plotted point number two. And then you can see what a difference, I'm gonna click off of that. You can see what a difference that made in the photo. Look at how much better that contrast is. So I'm actually gonna name this correct contrast, because you're gonna eventually have a lot of adjustment layers, and you're really gonna wanna start to name them based on what they're doing. Okay, so if I look in my info panel, I have two sets of numbers. The first set is what my photo started out as. The second set is what it is with the levels corrected. All right, so point number three is what we're going to use for color correction. Now on point number three, it is doing the same thing. It has the first set of numbers for before we did any contrast correction, and then the second set. So we'll stick with the second set of numbers because we want the contrast correction to be included. Now with color cast, it doesn't have to be a certain number, but all the numbers should be the same number since we plotted this on a neutral point. If I show and hide that contrast layer, it might be easy for some of you to start to pick up on what the color cast is. But even if you can't see what the color cast is here, look at your channels. One of them has an obvious high number, and it is much higher than the others. In this case, it's red. So that is telling me that I have a red color cast on this photo. Also, look at the clouds. The clouds are kind of have a pinkish hue, right? And that only happens at sunset and sunrise. So that kind of is another indicator. Look at the clouds. Okay, so in order to correct the color, I'm going to go down to my adjustment layer icon again. And this time I am going to go to color balance. Okay, so in your properties panel, under the color balance, you now have these three sliders. These three sliders kind of act as a teeter-totter. So you can introduce more cyan into the photo, but then that's going to take away red. So you can't have both. You can only have one or the other. Now you could definitely use this to kind of have a stylized look on your photo, but in this case we're trying to correct it, not make it look a certain way. So what I would advise you to do is to slowly start adjusting these numbers. This isn't something you should adjust really fast in one direction or the other. Most of these changes are going to be very subtle. Also, while you're doing this, start to watch your point number three, and you should see those numbers get closer together. We are affecting the midtones. Also be aware that you can go in and you can make these changes in the highlights. So if you wanted to remove red in the highlights or introduce cyan into the highlights, you could do that. Again, keep these values kind of small. You really want to pay attention to the detail in the photos, and you don't want to introduce too much color anywhere where there shouldn't be color. All right, typically highlights go yellow, but I think with the other changes I made, the blue looks better. There we go. That's really getting rid of some of that color cast. Okay, so you would just kind of be watching your info panel and then also just paying attention to the document. Right? You can't forget about the document and actually seeing the way that it looks. Okay, so that brought my set of numbers much closer together. I'm going to rename this layer to remove red. Okay, and then I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key and click on the eyeball for the background layer, and that is showing the changes that we've made so far. So we've made a big difference. One thing that I want to point out that I didn't mention earlier is after we did the crop, I want to show you how you can check the size of your document. So I just want to show you that it really did crop it to the size that we wanted. So if you go to your menu bar and choose Image, Image Size, here's one way that you could change the image size, like change your overall document size. So here we can see that it really did make it 6 inches by 4 inches and the resolution is 200. Okay, so again, that was image, image size. Okay, so now we are ready to start to remove items from the scene. Now, whenever you remove things from a background photo or from anything, you're actually not removing it so much as covering it up with something else. So that might be a different way for you to think about it. So whenever we do this, there's a couple of different concepts that you can use. So the first one that I'm going to use is actually one of the easiest ones, but because it isn't a special retouch repair tool, a lot of people kind of forget about it, but Photoshop artists use this one a lot. So what I want you to do first is click on the background layer. So you want to make sure the background layer is active in the layers panel. And then I want you to go to your rectangular marquee, make sure your feather is at 0, and I want you to make a selection. So like what I want to do is I want to start to remove this part of the pole right here. So I want you to make a selection of about that much of the background, because even though I don't know what is behind that pole, I can pretty much safely guess that it's the rest of those plants. So I'm just going to kind of fake it over here. So I have that selection made. I'm going to hit Command J on a Mac or Control J on a PC, and that's going to put that selection on its own layer. I'm going to name this layer New Plants. I'm going to select my Move tool, and I'm going to click and drag. I'm not going to worry about this box part yet. What I want to do is I want to line the mulch up. The mulch or the dirt or whatever that happens to be. I want to line that up as close as I can. Then what I'm going to do, and I just zoomed in with Command plus or Control plus, I am going to take my eraser tool. I am going to get a soft edge brush, pretty big size brush, and then I'm going to lower the opacity down maybe to about 20 to 30%. And then I'm going to slowly start to erase away the edge. Okay, so I'm just kind of clicking a bunch of times. Again, if you've got a trackpad, this might be a little bit harder, but like, look at how nice that blends in now. And all I had to do was click a few times. All right, bring back in some of those plants. Do the same thing over here. Okay, so you do this at a low opacity, so that way it's subtle and you can see the changes as you're kind of going. All right, so I would just maybe do this a few more times. I would maybe go back to the background layer and select these plants or bushes right here, put them on their own layer and move them over, and then kind of just do the same thing. Maybe take a selection of this fern looking thing, and I'm not a plant person, so I have no idea what this is. But I would make a selection of it, copy and paste it to its own layer, and then just flip it and maybe put it like right here. So this is a technique that you can use a lot, but it's probably one that people forget because it doesn't include any of the fancy tools. Okay, so that is one that you're probably going to use a ton, and I don't want you to forget about it. All right, but there are some dedicated retouch repair tools, and that's what we're going to look at next. So I want you to go back to the background layer in the layers panel and hit Command or Control J, and we're going to call this one Edits. So basically I don't want to destroy my background layer. All right, so the first tool that we're going to look at is the Spot Healing Brush tool. Okay, so if you look on your toolbar, this is the one that is just below the eyedropper tool. So the Spot Healing Brush if you look, okay, so now you can see my cursor. If you look, it is a circle, so it is a brush-based tool. So that means that you can use your bracket keys to make it larger or smaller. And then basically what this is going to do is this is going to take whatever is directly outside of this circle and copy and paste it to the inside, but also blend it together. So you don't typically use this for something that has a very chaotic background. This is good for something smaller. So I've got this little speck in the sky right here. I am just going to put my cursor over it, make sure my brush is big enough to fill it, and then just click, and it's going to get rid of it. I want to get rid of some of these lamp posts here, click and drag over them, and it's going to get rid of it. All right, if you start to do it with something that has too much detail, it doesn't always look right. Like if I wanted to get rid of the flowers, like sometimes it just kind of pulls color weird. Okay, so it's doing it okay in some places not so much. So you can use it, but it is typically for something smaller. Like if I want to get rid of this design, yeah, see, like it's trying to copy parts of the windows down here. So that might not be the best thing to use it for. But the smaller things, it was working out just fine. Okay, so what if you wanted something that is going to allow you to do that same idea where you copy from somewhere and put it on the inside and just kind of blend it, but you want control over where you copy it. So let's go down, because we're going to eventually be moving this sign, and just to make this easier to see, I'm going to hide the new plants layer for now. Okay, I'm still on the edits layer, but I just hid new plants for now. If we're going to be getting rid of this sign, I might get rid of this pole, and if I want to get rid of this pole, then I got to get rid of the shadow. All right, so you don't want to be like a Photoshop fail person, right? So let me zoom in a little bit further. So if I want to start to get rid of the shadow, and even if I don't do this shadow, maybe I'll do this one because it's a little bit easier to see. So I'm going to go to the healing brush. So click and hold on the spot healing brush in your toolbar and go down to healing brush. Again, use your left and right bracket keys to make it larger or smaller. And then I want to put my cursor in a clean area of the grass, so somewhere where there's no shadow, and hold down Alt or Option. And once you do that, you're going to see that your cursor changes to a crosshair, okay, like a little bullseye. If you Option or Alt click right here, what you basically just told Photoshop is you want to start copying from this point right here. So if I move my cursor over the shadow, you can see how Photoshop is saying, okay, well, if you were to start to click and drag right now, it is going to look like this. All right, so I'm clicking and I'm dragging, and then hopefully you can see the little plus sign that's there. That plus sign is telling it where you're copying from. So there's nothing wrong with letting go every now and then, moving your cursor around and holding down Option or Alt again, clicking, and then redoing that, okay, or going to a different area, okay, or just cleaning up some places. You don't want to leave any obvious patterns, anything that showed that you obviously photoshopped it. That's not the point at all. So you might have to kind of go in and clean up some of these things. So I'm just like constantly holding down Option and then clicking and then letting go and kind of cleaning up some of that stuff. Okay, so again, this is doing blending for me. So if I wanted to start to get rid of this sign, I can come in here and hold down Option and click and drag, and ew. Okay, that isn't doing that great of a job. The reason it's not doing that great of a job is because it is trying to blend this bright white color with this dark black. Anytime you use a tool that blends, and you're trying to use this in a high contrast area, you're going to have this problem. I'm going to Command or Control Z that. So what I would like to do is I would like to have a tool that gives me control over where I copy from, but I don't want it to blend. I just want to do a straight copy and paste. That is where the clone stamp tool is used. If you look 2 down from the healing brush, you're going to find the clone stamp tool. Well, okay, my clone stamp brush is huge for some reason. Okay, much better. All right, so same thing, same concept here. You're going to adjust your brush size. I usually work at a lower opacity. I might go to 30 now. And when you're on any of these tools that has an opacity option, if you just hit the number key near the top of your keyboard, so like if I hit 4, it'll jump to 40. If I hit 3, it'll jump to 30%. Okay, so again, let me make my brush a little bit smaller. Hold down Option or Alt and click to sample, and then just start clicking and dragging. And then what that's going to do is it's going to copy from one area and paste in another. Now, there is one issue with this, and I'm going to purposefully make this error to see if you can see it. All right. I don't know if you can tell, but do you see how there's like this grouping of bright highlights there? And then here, and then here, and then here. This is an obvious pattern that happens whenever you clone stamp and you clone stamp the wrong way. Whenever you clone stamp, let me just go back. I'm just hitting Command Z until I go back. There we go. All right, so whenever you're using the clone stamp, you want to keep sampling from different areas. Okay, do not keep sampling from the same area, or else it's going to be obvious that you photoshopped this, and that's not good. All right, and I might even kind of like tone down some of these colors so that way it's not obvious. All right, so let's do, jump in tools there. There we go. So you can kind of just like keep going over this. And again, option click from different areas, and that will help you to make this look more believable that you're kind of removing it from the scene. I might not copy from this area that's really dark because that's not going to look right. I would just kind of keep copying from the areas that are right around it. Okay, now I did leave that gap in the shadow here, and I did that on purpose so that way I could show you another tool. If you want a tool that is going to allow you to make a selection and then kind of do the copy paste, that is where the patch tool would come in handy. So in your toolbar, click and hold on the healing brush tool and then go down to the patch tool. What the patch tool does is it says make a selection, and kind of works like the lasso tool. Make a selection, so a loose selection around an area that you don't want anymore. And then click and drag it to an area that you would rather have that content in the place of where you originally selected. So basically you select the area that you don't want anymore and move it to a place that you would rather have there instead, and then let go, and then voila, it does the copy and paste for you. Now the great thing about all these methods that I just showed you is you can mix and match them together. So if I'm using the clone stamp up here and I start to get some obvious patterns, I can always come in with the spot healing brush and I can start to get rid of some of those patterns. Okay, so you can kind of use these things together. All right, next thing that I want to show you is pretty awesome with removing items, and it's called Content Aware Fill. Now, what I want to do first, and this is what you actually just have to do, you need to make a selection of things that you want to remove. So I'm actually going to use the polygonal lasso tool just because the selection works better for me this way. And I'm going to zoom in so it's easier for you guys to see where I'm selecting. All right, so my selection doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, I don't want it to be perfect. I want to leave some area around the pole and where the sky is, so that way it knows to kind of get some of that sky and kind of fill it in here. All right, so I am going to make this very loose selection around the sign and the pole. And hopefully, you can even pause right here and then come back to it whenever I'm done. Okay, so that is what I want. Now what you can do is go up to your menu bar and choose Edit, and then do Fill. We'll go over Content Aware Fill in another video, but this time we're just going to go to Fill, and we are going to go down to on Contents where it says Content Aware, and hit OK. Bam, look at that. If it takes a moment or two for your computer to kind of run that, to process it, no big deal. Just let it do its thing. Okay, so some really nice things just happened for us. It got rid of that entire sign pretty much. We would have to do the shadow. There's a few areas that we have to clean up, but one, your new plants layer might just do that for you, and you just might have to kind of, whoops, you might have to kind of get this and kind of paste over here or something. But look at how nice that worked. That's not going to work as well in every scenario, but I still wanted you to know about it because that was really nice. A few other things that I see that would need to be cleaned up. We have an obvious pattern right here where it just kind of was copied, copied, copied. So that would need to be fixed up. But that is still much quicker than having to go in and fill that in piece by piece. Okay, so that is all that we're going to do on this particular file. The next file that we're going to look at is the construction document. In your next assignment, there are going to be certain parts that might ask you to replace the sky with a better sky. So not that the sky in this image is bad, but it could definitely be better. Okay, it could definitely be better. So I'm going to unlock the background layer just by clicking on it in the layers panel, and I'm just going to call it building. And you also you also need to find a sky image. So you would have to find a sky image. Try to find one where you can match the angle. So I can see kind of far off into the distance here, just the same as we could kind of assume here. There are some sky photos where the person taking the photo looked straight up into the sky. So that wouldn't work in this scenario. All right, so the first thing I need to do is get rid of the sky that was here. So I am going to go to my quick selection tool, and I'm actually going to try select subject first and see what it does. Actually, not bad. Okay, if you didn't see what I did, let me do that again. I went to my quick selection tool, which is this tool right here. And then I just went up to my option bar and I chose select subject. If you don't see that icon, make sure you're on quick selection. And you can always go up to select and then select subject. Yeah, subject right there. Okay. Now it doesn't have the ground selected, so since I'm in additive mode, I am just going to click and drag to include all that because I don't want to delete that part, and I don't want to delete that right there. Nope. Okay, as always, to get a nice clean selection, you always want to go up and choose select and mask. Okay, so again, I am viewing mine on black. You could always view yours, like if you want to see it with the transparency, you can. Black is just one of the ways that I'm more used to seeing it. So I'm going to check Smart Radius, kind of bump that up a little bit. I don't want to do too much because it's starting to kind of chop into my roof here. I might smooth it just a tiny bit. There we go. Smoothing it kind of fixed it, so that's good. Shift edge, bring that down just a little bit. Perfect, and hit OK. All right, so I have, oops, I want that. There we go. I have the building selected, but I actually want to get rid of the sky. So I am going to inverse my selection by Shift Command I or Shift Control I, or you could go up to your menu bar and choose Select and then Inverse. So now that the sky is actually selected, I can just hit the delete key or the backspace key and then hit Command or Control D. I'm going to go to my move tool, select the sky, and then I am going to click and drag. And you're not going to see it move. It's okay. Just got to have faith. Put your cursor, I'm still dragging, put your cursor up to the construction tab. Continue dragging. I have not let go of my mouse this entire time. And then bring it into this document. And side note, if you hold down Shift before you release your mouse button, it will center that image. I'm going to hit Command or Control T to transform. And then I can't see the entire bounding box, so I'm going to hit Command 0. And then I am going to resize this. Just like that. And then hit Enter or Return. I'll name this layer Sky. Now, the layer order is not correct. I want to be able to have the sky below the building, so I'll just click in the layers panel and drag this down, and there I have it. Now, I don't think the position of this is quite right. I think it would be better if I did this. Okay, even if you want to see like that hillside in the background, I don't need to see it too much, but this looks a little bit better with the way that the clouds look. And here's the thing that's great is if this sky, like this sky maybe needs a little bit more yellow in it, just a little bit, then I could always put a color adjustment layer above this. Or if my sky was a little bit too bright or too dark, then now you guys kind of know how you can fix that. So you could always kind of go in and do that. Okay, so that is kind of the basics of retouching and repairing photos, and it's definitely going to be something that's going to help you with your next assignment, the location retouch assignment, which is listed on Blackboard. And that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks.